Hello, welcome to today's talk. My name is Regina DeMeo, and I'm a family law attorney in Maryland and DC. And with me today, I have Ben Stich. He is a divorce coach and mediator for over 12 years up in Massachusetts, but he can practice in most places in the US. Thanks so much for being here, Ben.
Thank you, Regina. I'm looking forward to this.
Absolutely. So I'm really excited because I think there's this misconception that mediation is only for like low conflict cases, and that's not your experience. So I wanted to touch on that today. But first, I want to start with you also do marriage mediation. Is that right?
I do, yes.
So what does that entail?
Um, so a lot of people go to counseling for marital issues, and there's certainly an approach called discernment therapy that not a lot of people know, but it's a very short-term approach when people are trying to figure out if they want to stay married or get divorced. But mediation is another avenue, and I often see folks who either tried therapy and didn't find it effective, or just think a more structured, less clinical approach to creating space to be able to discuss the issues, figure out where the communication barriers are, focus more on the future and trying to generate solutions. So often when I engage in marriage mediation, it's not, one of the things I pride myself is there's no one size fits all approach. Part of my job is to craft a process that fits every family and their needs. But often I'll meet with each spouse privately first to really understand what they're hoping to accomplish, where they perceive the communication barriers to be, what the hot button topics are, how to perhaps consider adjusting the way you communicate so that it can be effective, and then what are the goals and the priorities. And then we work together, and often, although not always, but often the discussions about whether or not to get married or divorced. So it's marital mediation. Some people say, like, should we stay married or divorce mediation? In
Okay.
Massachusetts, at least, it only takes one party to trigger a divorce process. And it's often that, one spouse has been thinking about divorce and their concerns about their marriage much earlier, much sooner than the other spouse. So I have some marriage mediations where the couple is really kind of using mediation to navigate the different places each spouse is in. If it's going to go towards divorce, starting to like early thinking about separation potentially. And I've had other marital mediations where they work on their marriage, and we have a succession of sessions, and then it usually gets spaced out. Um, and sometimes people go off on their own. And I'll be honest, I'd say more often than not, marital mediation turns into divorce mediation, but not always. Um, One of the things that some clients like about what I offer as mediation is if they want, I can also draft summary notes. And a lot of the conflict in marriages are about communication, and people think they had this great conversation and they're on the same page, and they walk away with vastly different interpretations. So
Right.
sometimes having some clarity can be helpful. Um, it's there's just a lot of paths for families to figure out how to communicate and resolve conflict, and mediation can be really helpful for some people. Um, it's interesting. It's not the majority of my work, but at any given time I have a couple of marital mediation cases. And what's really nice about it is it's not legal, right? It's just about the relationship and their communication and
Right.
trying to figure out how they want to move forward, either in the short term or the long term.
Right, because when I do marriage mediation, it's really focused on the money. So usually we'll do mediation because people want a post-nuptial agreement.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. So I think that's probably some of the differences given our backgrounds.
right.
Um, so I'm a non-attorney mediator, although I mediate all the legal matters related to divorce. But I think people find me because they need help with communication, co-parenting matters, and more general conflict resolution.
Well, that brings me to
Now,
my
if they
next
move to
question.
separation, we obviously engage in the financial matters. Um, but I'll often refer post-ups to people like you.
Right. So yeah, my next question was going to be like, what are the advantages of working with like a divorce coach as a mediator as opposed to working with someone like me as an attorney? especially on parenting plans.
I appreciate that. And this is something you and I discussed previously. When I was speaking with you originally, Regina, I think I told you, like, I felt like I was listening to myself. While attorneys have a bad rap sometimes, I think they play a really important and crucial role in divorce, particularly if they're, friendly to mediation and friendly to collaboration, and really trying to serve their client's best interests. And they're really skilled at financial division and some of the legal matters. But as a retired family law judge told me once here in Massachusetts, there's no law course on which therapist the kids should go to, or whether it's better to have a 3-4 schedule or a 5-5-2-2 schedule, or a week on, week off schedule, or soccer or lacrosse, which activity should the kids go on, and is it okay to go on a 4-night vacation versus a 7-night vacation? And so I would say on the parenting side, given, at least in my experience, I have a social work background. I worked with families for many years before pivoting to mediation in very high conflict situations in treatment facilities and schools. And so you can craft a mediation that's child-centered, where it's really about what is the, who are your children, what are their needs, what are their temperaments, and crafting a plan that really hopefully strikes the balance and finds that sweet spot between the needs of the parents and their circumstances with what really makes the most sense for kids. And so there are some attorneys who are great at doing that, but often I see a lot of cookie cutter or very, very generic plans that lack specificity. In fact, I have a mediation right now, post-divorce. I do a lot of post-divorce work, and the clients in the consult said, wait, this parenting plan it provides no detail, and we're moving, and we have no idea how to do this. And every time we try to talk about it, we basically blow up at each other. Can you read the separation agreement? So they sent it to me before the first mediation session. In the first session, I was like, you're right, this is not a roadmap for you. A good separation agreement provides a roadmap. And to me, the higher the conflict, the more detail you should have. Try to preempt and anticipate where those conflict points are as co-parents, and either try to proactively come up with a plan for them or proactively develop the process by which they're going to work through it. But parents can do whatever they want offline, but if they can't agree, a good separation agreement is the tiebreaker, right? It's the default.
Oh no, absolutely. And you guys go into a lot more detail than what the court would care about. Like, we cannot go into dating protocols, like how are you going to introduce a new partner to the children? Nor do we care. Honestly, at this point, we feel like, each parent has a right to do what they want, but it's at least worth a discussion. And it's something that social workers will go into that no attorney will really go into.
Right. Yeah, that's a great example. I always ask. It's, I provide all my clients a lot of tools to help guide them. And one of them is a checklist of topics. And, there's a number of topics that I explain are required to be addressed in your agreement. And then there's a bunch of topics that if you want to discuss, we can. And, future introduction to significant others is one of them. And people like to negotiate, communication expectations, being informed in advance, or what criteria they want to use to determine when it's appropriate for the kids. Some families want to do that, and it's great. Is it legally enforceable? Probably not. Is it helpful to have really clear intentions and to be on the same page, particularly if you're trying to rebuild some trust in a co-parenting relationship? I always like to say, you're going to be grandparents together. So number one, mediation is your kind of opportunity with training wheels to figure out how to reshape your relationship from a romantic one to a co-parenting one, and work through the difficulties with communication. Because you can either create a wonderful future for your kids where they can feel comfortable having both parents walking down the aisle, or you can ruin their wedding experience, or who's going to be at the hospital when they have the first grandchildren because they know that mom and dad can't still be in the same room together.
So what do you think is the biggest source of conflict with the parents that you're working with on a co-parenting plan?
It's a tough question because it's so different, but I guess
I mean, for us, it's usually the schedule.
Yeah. Well, I mean, certainly I have a lot of mediations that come to me because of the parenting schedule. I mean, holidays are really difficult
Yeah.
for a lot of families. Particularly, I mean, I had a mediation recently where they worked through everything and they just really got stuck on Christmas. And it took multiple sessions. They finally worked it out. And one of the things I love about mediation is I think most people have reasonable perspectives from their lens, from their worldview, even if the other party to the mediation doesn't see it. And there was all these competing needs, right? Well, the daughter loves this tradition, and why do we want to change that? Yeah, but I want to create new traditions.
Right.
Yeah, but this is my family's schedule, and your family doesn't have a schedule. Well, yeah, but my family can create a schedule.
Right.
Um, we should defer to what she wants. Well, it doesn't really matter as much what she wants because we're her parents, and we should figure out what makes the most sense, right? And they're all
Valid
reasonable.
points.
They're
Yeah.
all valid points, and they eventually came to an agreement. But it was really difficult, and we hit a couple of impasses where it just made sense to put a pin in it, pause,
Yeah.
and go back. Some of the other issues are around developing the parenting plan itself. Sometimes a significant other discussion can be hot button. I always let folks know that they don't need to address it. And of course, there's financial matters, child
Right.
support, and how to think about college, and of course, financial division. And then post-divorce, I think where a lot of the conflict comes up is the difficulty with parents who really don't like each other, giving each other the benefit of the doubt, um, and just making the worst possible conclusions and assumptions, which often is inadvertently fueled by the kids, right? Kids tell parent A one thing and parent B another thing because kids are kids, and they either don't want to disappoint their parent, or they have different perspectives, or maybe they're just trying to get what they want. And dad said this and mom said that, and then they don't check in with each other, and they don't have a structured process for ongoing communication, and just distrust grows.
So what I usually see post-divorce is that people, like, they feel like they have this agreement and this is their agreement for life. So there's this lack of flexibility. And what I always tell people at the end of their divorce is, the situation's going to change. Someone's going to remarry. Someone's going to move. Like, there's going to be additional complexities to this family structure, and you got to be flexible.
Yes.
And there's a real lack of flexibility,
Yeah.
I find.
I actually I talk about that as early as my free consultation.
Yeah.
One, because I think parents come in with a lot of stress and pressure that they feel like this is their one-shot deal to figure it out for the next 12 years, right? Which
Right.
is just unbelievable burden to carry. But I say, look, you're going to make the best possible plan you can for now and the near future, and then also a process by which you're going to reevaluate it, because your kids' needs are going to change as they move through different developmental stages. You're going to move, you're going to get laid off, you're going to get a great promotion, you're going to remarry, you're going to have a blended family, and all those things. And the court understands that will lead to the need potentially to adjust and modify. And you can adjust and modify offline, but then it's not enforceable, but it's cheaper. Or you can, formally make changes and submit it to the court. The other thing that comes up a lot in the very high conflict situations that I've been working with are activities.
Right.
Right. Disagreements over what's in the best interest for activities, or disagreements about the impact of activities on each parent's schedule. My go-to example is this family I used to work with. They met with me every 4 to 6 months, and it was before every new hockey season. And the conflict was so high because one parent really wants to support the child's real interest in hockey, but one of the parents wanted the child to be in 2 or 3 different leagues, and the other parents like, we don't have any family time. Like, I can't live this life, and I don't think it's good for him because I want him to be more well-rounded. And again, they both came to it from the perspective what they thought was in their child's best interest, but they had very different understanding of what was in their child's best interest, and it had real implications on their lives.
Yeah. So that brings me to my next question, because you actually do classes for high conflict cases on mediation, right? Like I find that fascinating. How does that work?
So it's a hybrid. I wouldn't say it's, well, I would answer in two ways. So there in Massachusetts, there's one court mandated high conflict parent education program, and it's taught through a local school of psychology called William James College. And it was developed by a retired family law judge here in Massachusetts, and an expert in kind of family forensic psychology, and the woman who teaches, postdocs on custody evaluations and GAL reports and some parent coordination. So this is designed for families who the courts see as the frequent flyers, with their files this thick, and where they're continually resorting to court to resolve parenting matters, like activities and significant others and modifications to child support and vacation time and things like that. And so this is it's basically very intensive boot camp. It's a 9-week session, 9-week course, 3 hours a session with 6 high conflict co-parenting sets. And it's a combination of conflict resolution, teaching new communication, really learning about the impact of chronic stress on kids and their developing brains, and the real trauma that it can create. And we report back to the court. And they have very intensive expectations in between sessions where they have to try all new approaches to co-parent. Some of these parents haven't been in the same room together for years. Maybe the conflict's that high.
Right.
We start off the bat in within the first 5 minutes, before we've even introduced ourselves as instructors, we say, okay, rule number 1, he's not the jerk. She's not the fill in the blank. You're not the ex. You're each other's co-parenting partners, or CPPs. So either refer to each other by your first name or your CPP, but that's it. And when you speak to each other, you have to look each other in the eye. And no eye rolling, no nasty expressions, no sighs, and then we go from there. So we set the tone that this isn't about your relationship. This is about your kid's childhood and experience. And it all comes from there. We do a ton of perspective taking for them about trying to put themselves in their children's shoes. And really very structured ways of communicating that's emotionally safe for them. But then and it's fun. It's not impactful for every couple, but there's at least several couples who go through it every time where it's transformative. Whether or not it means they never resort to court or they actually become friendly again, but it just reduces so much conflict for the kids. But then I do high conflict co-parenting mediation, where I borrow heavily from a lot of the principals in the class, but help people do it in a confidential setting, because the class is not confidential because we report back to the court.
Right.
And it can influence judges' decision-making. And in mediation, it's an opportunity to really dive much more deeply into their individual concerns and problem solving. Sometimes it's financial, but usually it's not.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, this has been great. So if people wanted to contact you for further information, get more resources, what's the best way to reach you?
I appreciate you asking. Well, I have my website, which is benstich.com, benstich.com. And I have a ton of blog articles on there about communication and conflict resolution, and resources for divorce, as well as resources for these other types of family mediation, whether it be marital or adult siblings in conflict. I have a mediation right now between a mom and her adult daughter, and they were estranged. Okay. And then in terms of contacting me directly, my email is ben@benstich.com, S-T-I-C-H. But if you misspell it, like everyone, and do S-T-I-T-C-H, it will still redirect to me, because people have done that my whole life. So
that's great.
And my phone number is 617-872-7731.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much for taking time to talk to us today.
I really appreciate it. Thanks, Regina.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.